Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 770, and today's date is September 19th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, before we get started, I just want to make an announcement. Sunday, I'll be uploading an interview with Fabian Calvo. If you're on the X22 Report alert email system, you will get an email if you subscribe to the X22 Report Spotlight channel. YouTube should send you an email. If not, you can go right over to YouTube. Type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video, or you can come over to the x22report.com site. You'll see it on the right-hand side in the sidebar. You'll just have to scroll down a little bit, and you'll see it on the right-hand side. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, on Friday, we saw the market. It came down quite a bit. People aren't buying what the Fed is saying, that they can't raise the interest rates because the economy is still recovering. We know that this economy is not recovering at all. And we understand the whole economy is based on the petrodollar system. And when we take a closer look at the petrodollar system, what do we actually see here? Well, what do we know about it? Well, we know the countries use the petrodollar system, especially in the Middle East, to sell the oil, which means other countries need to hold the petrodollar in reserves to purchase this oil. But we're seeing a lot of energy exporting countries. They are set to pull their petrodollars out of the world market this year. Actually, when we take a look at this, we see oil producers are now liquidating their petrodollar assets at a frenzied pace. And if we look back in time, what do we see? Well, back in 2004, 2005, we see that the petrodollar exports were very high. They were around 300 billion US dollars, all the way up to 500 billion in 2006. We are now close to zero. And we see, when we zoom in on this, Latin America countries, they were one of the largest, now non-existent. We know a lot of their economies are falling apart. We understand a lot of the Latin American countries are dealing not in the dollar. They're making deals with China, Russia. We see the Middle East markets, very small portion of that, about $30 billion worth. We see the Asian markets completely gone. And as time goes on, these countries, they're looking to get out of the petrodollar because they realize what's happening. I mean, this is the first time in 20 years that OPEC nations will be sucking liquidity out of the market rather than adding to it through investments. I mean, we can see what's happening at this point. This is a slow slide which is accelerating now into a major collapse. Australia's largest investment bank, Macquarie, just made the case that, QE is coming. There's a very high probability that it's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And we know that the Fed is going to have to do this because when we look at real information, not the statistical crap that the government continually throws at us, but the real hard economic data, we see that everything is contracting at this point. And the Fed, the U.S. government, they're cornered. I mean, the Fed came out and they were trying to tell us, when unemployment comes down to 6%, looks like we'll be ready. When it comes down to 5.8, we'll be ready. And they said this so many times. I think it was 55 times already that they said this. So we are seeing that the Fed is never, ever going to raise interest rates. Now, if they do, this is a signal that they're getting ready to do something to bring this whole system down. Remember, the central bankers, they would rather bring it down themselves because they can control it. They can blame someone else. If there's a black swan or something else occurs, they have no control over it, and everyone's going to point their finger at them. But one of the reasons, as we know, is that the bonds would completely implode if they start raising interest rates. And this crisis will be spreading in the coming months. Currently, right now, it's focused on countries that cannot print or create their own currencies. The countries that are in Europe, particularly Greece. However, China and Japan are also showing signs of trouble, and ultimately the bond crisis will be coming to the U.S. And there's a lot of financial experts out there saying, yes, bonds are in a bubble. Well, we know there are a lot of things in a bubble: stocks, bonds, housing, automobile loans, student loans, derivative market. These are all bubbles that have been blown up by the central banks. The bond bubble is now well over $100 trillion in size. And if we were to include like credit instruments that trade based on bonds, it's over $600 trillion. Globally, the sovereign bond market is $58 trillion in size. So, with all this in mind, the bond bubble really has already begun to burst. And the fuse was lit. It was grease that lit the fuse. And the Federal Reserve understands this. They know it. This is why they're using terms like a moratorium on payments. They don't want to say default. They don't want to say anything like that. But this system right now cannot be sustained. They know this. This is why we see an acceleration everywhere. For war, for taking the weapons away from the people, bringing in more wealth to the elite, allowing corporations to get away with a lot more things that they ever have gotten away with. And you can see they're chipping away, or really trying to remove, the rights of the people, because they realize that they have a certain period of time here, because the system is really imploding on itself. And just from the petrodollar system, you can see we were at the height. I mean, it was $500 billion. We're at like zero now. They're getting rid of their reserves, dumping treasuries. I mean, the Fed just can't hold all the treasuries. It makes no sense. They don't want the housing market. They don't want the prices to come down, because all those homes that are left on the books of the banks would be completely insolvent, which they already are, but everyone would see it now, and the housing market would just crash. So all these things that they're trying to keep up and inflated, everything's starting to fall apart. They're running out of pieces of tape. And this is why we see the escalation in the Middle East, the escalation in Ukraine, in Africa. We're hearing a lot of warnings. We understand that the U.S. is going to be talking to Russia. But of course we think, oh, they're going to be talking about how they're going to strike the Islamic State, how they're going to work together. Well, that's not exactly what they're going for. The United States really doesn't want to have anything to do with Russia or coordinating attacks against their proxy army. Actually, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that President Assad, he still has to go, but the timing of his departure should be decided through negotiation. And he's going to talk to Russia about this, and talk to Iran about this, to use their influence to convince Assad that he needs to transition away from his government. Kerry said the United States welcomed Russia's involvement in tackling the Islamic State. But a worsening refugee crisis underscored the need to find a compromise that could also lead to a political change in the country. We're too busy with the refugee crisis to really talk about coordinating our efforts here. So what they want from Russia, Iran, is to convince Assad to remove himself. Well, the clock is ticking down. And we have to remember, these refugees that we see moving across Europe, the majority of them aren't even Syrian. And we know that Turkey has been amassing refugees in their country for this particular reason, to get the coalition, Europe, everyone on board about removing Assad, about setting up a safe zone. But as Russia continually brings in military hardware for Assad, supports Assad, brings in advisors to help out, to go after the Islamic State, the clock is definitely ticking down for the United States. And Assad right now, with some of the new logistical, technical weapons that he's getting from Russia, are highly effective and very accurate. These are rocket launchers that he's getting, air-to-ground missiles, and they are taking out the Islamic State. And right now, Assad is moving through Syria, beating the Islamic State. Now, of course, this is the proxy army for the United States government central bankers, and this poses a huge problem. This is what they didn't want to happen. This is why they're saying, ooh, Russian aggression, look, Russia's coming in there. But there's absolutely no proof whatsoever. They're showing satellite images of this airport with 2 helicopter pads, which means absolutely nothing, because they have a contract with Russia to build this stuff. They didn't show Russian forces. They didn't show concrete proof. They showed absolutely nothing once again. And if you go on Google Maps, you can find the same airport. It's not like it's something that they uncovered. It was always there. And actually, Russia has always said, yes, this is what we are doing. But they're using this to demonize Russia because they don't want the Islamic State beaten. Now, at this point, this strategy that Putin has put the U.S. in a corner. And the question is, what is the United States government central bankers' next move? Because they know this economy is coming down. They know they need to prop it up. They know they need to get Assad out. They've been trying for years. Even when they made the deal for the chemical weapons, their deal was really, let's get Assad out of there. That's their goal. That was a temporary deal so they can regroup and think of another plan, which most likely they're doing right now. And that might be an event. And this is why everyone needs to be ready. I don't think this is just going to fizzle out. And if it does, it means they're regrouping. It doesn't mean that it's ended. Because when we look at history here, we know once they have their sights on a goal, they don't stop. And for all those people who are preparing, continue to prepare. Prepare with cash on hand, gold and silver, medical supplies, toiletries. If you haven't started, you can go to lifereliance.com. They have bug out bags. They have water filtration system. They have food. You can customize it, get it delivered right to your house. Doesn't matter which way you use it, which way you use to prep, as long as you're doing it, as long as you're ready. Because we're seeing more and more fluctuations in the market. We're seeing a lot of countries dumping the petrodollar, dumping the reserves, dumping the treasuries. And all of this is going to lead to one thing and one thing only: a collapse and freeze up of the entire system. I mean, I'm going to refer back to the interview with Bill Holter when he said, when this system comes down, credit lines are going to freeze up, which means deliveries are going to stop to the markets. And we can see this actually coming. I mean, we saw it in Greece. We saw it in Cyprus. People couldn't get food. People couldn't get their cash out. And we can see that this will definitely happen. I mean, if you remember back to the 70s, when we were coming off the gold standard and going on to the petrodollar system, of course, they told us there was a problem with getting oil, that we were running out, which was completely false, fake, phony. You couldn't get fuel, only on certain days. Gas stations would put a red flag out, a green flag, meaning green, they have it, red, they don't. They would even go by license plate numbers, odd and even, the last digit, to go get fuel. And people had to prepare and get as much as they possibly can when they went to the station, because they might have gone a day or 2 or 3 with no fuel whatsoever. This time, and that was the beginning of the system, This time it's the end of the system, the petrodollar system. It's going to be absolutely awful. And those people who remember back in the 70s, there were no jobs. People had a very tough time finding work. Inflation was sky high. And that was the start of the new petrodollar system. Again, we are at the end of it. This system will cease to exist. And there will be a certain period of time where things are completely non-existent. You will not be able to get them. And this is what we are preparing for. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.